Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. On April 16th, 2021, public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there was anyone in the room with you, which is required in the right to know law. Okay, we'll start with Matt Carboni.
I'm here by myself. My wife's in the house, though.
Very good. Katie Adams?
I'm here. My kids are in the house, but not the room.
Excellent. Alexis Simpson?
I'm here in my house. There's no one in here with me right now, but I don't know. Kids or husband may come back at some point.
Very good.
Also, I've been having a little bit of trouble with my internet. So if I blank out my videos, sometimes that helps me maintain the Wi-Fi.
Okay, no problem.
Getting fixed soon.
Very good. If that ever happens to anybody, if you need to leave the room or whatever, and you put your name, that's totally fine. Darius Thompson. I see you, Darius.
I am. I'm here. Am I muted? No. I'm in the barn alone, and I do have a hard stop at 3:59.
Okay, very good. I mentioned that before you even arrived. Very good. Tanisha Johnson.
Yes.
I am here, and I am alone.
Looks like you're in the trees.
I am in the woods, living my life.
And Molly Cowan.
Hey, everybody, here alone in the room.
And Daryl Brown.
I am here. I'm alone.
Like I said, and Emily let me know that Emily would not be here today. There we are. Okay, very good. We have a quorum. So our first order of business is approval of the minutes. We had probably 3 pages of minutes. Were there any edits, any errors in those? I have to take a moment and tell both between Matt and Alexis, we have really great note takers. You have been amazing with that. So anyway, I will look for a motion to approve the minutes as written if there are no amendments.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Matt.
Second.
Second by Katie. Very good. I will call the roll. All those in favor, Matt Carboni.
Aye.
Katie Adams.
Aye.
Alexis Simpson.
I wasn't here, so I think
Yeah. Actually, the truth of the matter is I found out later you can actually vote on minutes even if you're not in meetings, but that's just an aside. I did look that up once, but in any event,
okay, I'll know.
It's up to you how you feel about it.
Okay, thanks.
Darius Thompson.
Aye.
And Tanisha Johnson.
Aye.
Okay, and the chair says aye.
Yes. Aye.
Okay, we're good. All right, great. The minutes are approved. Very good. Our first order is old business, which finally we get to hear completely, hopefully, from Dispatcher Joya to discuss her transition as a dispatcher. We've touched a little bit on this, but we really never got to spend a bit of time on it. So you can take it away, Ashley.
Thank you. So I'm Ashley. I'm a dispatcher with Exeter Police and Fire Department. I've been coming up on 2 years on May 1st. I guess initially we have to go through 8 to 10 weeks of training. So that's before you even get to go out on your own or anything like that. We have a very intensive 8 to 10 weeks. And I think we're actually considering making that longer if need be, because there is so much to cover, especially if you don't have dispatching background. I come from 10 years of mental health background, being a triage clinician for a mental health crisis hotline for all of Merrimack Valley. So I do have some phone experience, but nothing dispatch related. My mental health background definitely has helped me in many ways, more than I could even count. the 8 to 10 weeks are very challenging. You go home every night exhausted. Once you get to the point where you feel like you've learned so much, you couldn't possibly put more in there. You do. you learn more, and curves thrown your way. You just have to learn to deal with them. I think my mental health background is what made me think about dispatching. Someone had mentioned it in passing that maybe that might sound like a good idea for me to try. And for me, I went on a whim and filled out some applications and happened to fit right in. It is something that you have to fit into, if that makes sense. It's something that you have to be somebody who can multitask. You have to be somebody that can do more than one thing at one time. You can't just see one thing through. You have multiple things you have to make sure get seen through from the start to the end. No matter what, you have to get all of it done, which can be very overwhelming, which is another reason why dispatching isn't for everyone. And it's okay if it's not for you, but you don't know unless you try. And that was where I came in with my applications to see if maybe I fit. And so far, so good. I feel like I have found my career, what I ultimately want to do for hopefully the rest of my life. And I think my mental health background, knowing and being able to check in with myself, with my own mental health, on top of being able to help other people with their mental health, is what keeps me going. I feel like my favorite thing about my job is that people call me for help, and I can give that to them. You call me and you ask for something, and I can do everything in my power to make sure that you get the help that you need. Every single call is vastly different from the last. It's not something that you can prepare for. I can't assume that the next phone call is for something specific, because most likely it's not. For the next person that would consider trying to be a dispatcher, I would say that you've got to have patience. You have to be able to multitask, like I've already said. You have to have excellent people skills. You have to be able to hang up the phone from someone who might have just made you very mad and pick up the next phone call and say, "Hey, Exeter Police and Fire, how can I help you?" And put the last phone call behind you like it never happened. I'm trying to think of what other things you guys might want to know about. We can only do so much training too. Like, you can only assume, or you can only train for certain events to happen for a period of time. And then as you step into real life, everything happens in a totally different way than what you trained for. So you have to have really good instincts. And I think that's where the 8 to 10 week program comes in and ends up being so important, because it really does give you excellent sounding boards to come off of and be able to work from a base, a very sturdy foundation. Does anybody
have any other questions about that, or?
I'm sure there are questions. I know I have some already, but I'd like to go to the group or whoever would like to. Alexis had your hand up. I'm sorry. Alexis first.
Hi, thank you for sharing your experience, Ashley.
Absolutely.
I'm really struck by how helpful it is for you both personally and professionally to have had that background in the mental health field. And I was just wondering, I bet that you are also really helpful to your co-dispatchers because of that.
I'd like to think so.
It's definitely come in handy.
Yeah, I bet. And I was just wondering if you could give a little more insight into whether, I don't know, I'm thinking about a couple of things. One is recruiting other people who have that kind of background and experience. And so ways we can think about that and integrate that into some of the other work that we do in other communities that we go into. But then also, have you learned anything and can make suggestions about what kind of training you want the dispatchers to have? You said 8 to 10 weeks is great, but maybe if you didn't have the mental health training, you would add more on to that. And I bet you have some thoughts about that too. I'd love to hear that as well.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think my mental health background has, in a lot of situations, come in handy. And I'm like, no, you guys, let's stop and think about this for a second. That's not what it sounds like. Or this is what it possibly could be. Giving people my feedback has been fairly important. And I think as far as training, the mental health trainings that we have come up with since I've been hired have been exactly what I would wish that we would have. The lady that presented last week now does a yearly mental health training, and she's been the most right on, person with giving us feedback and having us be able to check in with ourselves and in dealing with all these calls that can be really draining. The only other thing I would say is like implicit bias. I think it's important to remember that, like I said, when you hang up that phone, that next call's a totally new call. No matter who it is on the phone, no matter who's calling, you have to pretend that you don't know who that is and just Exeter Police and Fire, how can I help you? and take it as a totally new situation. Not be jaded by the last thing that happened or the last time you spoke to this person. It's a new day. It's a new hour, even sometimes. And you have to answer that phone without, I guess, attitude would be the word. But Exeter, as a police department, does an excellent job with training on that. I do have to say that.
Thanks.
You have more, Alexis? I'll go to Katie next.
Hi, 2 questions. One is, what would you say is the most common misconception about your job? And second question is, what is your favorite thing about it?
Most common misconception, I believe, is people thinking that we're not the people that they should be talking to. Like talking to us like we're not the people that can actually send them the help. Well, you have to actually tell me what you want for me to send you the correct help, whether that be a firefighter, whether that be an EMT, whether that be a police officer. You have to talk to me first and get through wanting or demanding, I need to speak to an officer now. Okay, but what's happening? What do you need to speak to an officer for? Because they go where I tell them. You can't just.
And there's certain information that we need as dispatched in order to get them the right kind of help.
Right. And I mean, my favorite part, like I said, it's actually being able to speak to people on their worst days most of the time and being able to hear them over the phone in this terrible moment and say, okay, I've got this. I've got help on the way. You're okay. I'm sending someone to do the best they can. Because we're Exeter and we're a great group of people, every personnel that we have, fire or police, I know you're going to be in good hands. I trust the people that I'm sending you.
Sounds like you are definitely in the right job. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? I don't see. I had okay, Tanisha, yep.
Oh, I was just going to ask, in your 8 to 10 weeks of training, what really is included in that training? And also, is there annual training that you do, quarterly? Does the training keep going on for the year? Sorry, and third question, is it pass or fail? Is there tests? Like if you don't pass certain things, do you still move on? Kind of what happens with that?
So our training is broken down into weekly sections. We start with basic call taking, since that's the foundation of what we do. And each phase has a set of skills that we go off a checklist. So everybody is following the same structured program. And then at the end of each week, there's a review quiz. And then we have several tests that they have to pass in order to complete their training. And then once they're off training, there's a probation period of a year. And me as a supervisor, I meet with them weekly to go over, what are you running into that you're finding confusing, or where do we need to brush up on stuff? And they're free to come to me and to ask for extra help on anything, because there's so much information that dispatch has to know that it sounds like 6 to 10 weeks is a long time to learn, but the scope of our job is pretty expansive. So it's easy for some of those smaller details to kind of go on the back burner, and you need a little refresher. We also do monthly trainings in-house for everybody, and that includes dispatch. When something changes policy-wide, I do, a little bit of a PowerPoint for them, and then we have a skills test that they'll take to make sure they understood the concept or whatever's changing with our job. So we do continue education. That's something that we work on constantly, and that's evolving. But yeah, there's certain benchmarks they have to make to be sure they're retaining the information. And before we release them on their own, we make sure they're comfortable and I'm comfortable. So there's about a 2-week shadow period that we do just to make sure, I don't want to overload them. I want to make sure that they're comfortable being in control of their shift. So. Does that kind of answer your question?
Thanks. Did you have anything else, Tanisha, on that? No. Okay. Matt?
Jessica, a quick question about working with other surrounding communities or the state. Is there a state certification for a dispatcher, or do you guys train regionally for major disasters? I know we've had ones in surrounding towns, and I'm assuming Rockingham County or the state police were the primary communication center for those. That said, it could actually happen in Exeter. And if that were the case, would Exeter be the primary? Can you just explain how you guys prepare for that in training and both either statewide certification or how you guys handle it?
Sure. There's no statewide certification required for dispatchers. We're part of ACCO, which is like an international association that offers up online training and offers up standards for dispatching. There's also something called NENA, which is the National Emergency Number Association, that's nationwide. And they offer, again, the same thing, various online trainings and certain safety standards that, we're working to meet in order to keep fresh and be on target for our job. As for the natural resources, like any disaster or anything like that, we do a yearly Seabrook drill, and that's part of the Exeter Emergency Management. So that's done through Chief Wilking on the fire side. We take part in active shooter trainings. They've incorporated dispatch in those. So we sit in on those and we get to actually dispatch them when our department is doing that, which has been immensely helpful. And we've been working steadily towards including dispatch in more of those training, so we're part of that. We also have something that's called Mutual Link, It's a new program offered up by the state that they're giving to certain dispatch centers. There's about 52 of us across the state that links up dispatch centers together. And that's a resource that we train on, like Rockingham County has it, Hampton has it, all the surrounding agencies. It allows us to link in radios, any kind of resources that we have within the dispatch center, we can link in those agencies. So if we have a major event, they can talk to us on the radio, or, they can use our resources, or we can use theirs in order to come together to get through that. So there are several things in place right now. Mutual Link is a newer thing. We just got it in January, and we've gotten to train on it quite a few times. And that system is really, I think, will be very beneficial to us. So we were excited about that.
That's great to hear that you have it, and that especially that you train with it, because touching it and practicing with it is all the difference of when it actually becomes an emergency, that it comes as a natural response. You practice as you play and such. I don't know if the board realizes this, and I don't know much about it other than if somebody calls 911 in the state, my perception is it goes to Concord to the 911 center. Can you just explain, so everybody on the board and in town that's listening to this, they understand how a 911 call is routed through or to?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you dial 911, it goes to two PSAPs in the state. One is based in Concord, I believe the other one's in Laconia. They establish your location and what you need. So if you have a medical emergency, they have what's called emergency medical dispatch, where they go through a set of protocol to find out what your medical emergency is. And then it comes to us in the dispatch center. If you call and you need police or just the fire department, they verify the location and then transfer it straight to us. So we have 3 emergency lines that we answer in dispatch and several backups. In Rockingham County, actually, if we get inundated with calls, they are our backup for that as well. So what will happen is your call goes to 911 and then it comes to us. They stay on long enough to verify the address, and then we take over from there, asking the questions and getting you. If it's a medical call, then you will go through, they'll ask you a series of questions, then they transfer over to us, we start rescue, and then you'll stay on the phone. 911 will stay on the phone with those people until help arrives. Because unfortunately, we're a small dispatch center, we can't stay on that call and give that kind of detailed instructions. So that's how the system works here in New Hampshire.
Thanks for sharing that with the group. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you, Jessica. I just had a couple quick ones. Do you do sort of, I guess I'll call it after action type of thing, sort of a postmortem, for lack of a better term, after a day, or if a call went one way, they should have gone another. In other words, if the dispatcher, said, this is what I think we need, and then it turned out to be different. Not that it was wrong, just it was different. So do you get that sort of feedback is where I'm going, I guess, from whether it's the police and fire. And then sort of second to that, do you get to go on the sort of the ride along, so to speak, with fire and police so that you can actually see it from the other side in theory? So you're seeing what's happening, what they're going to face, and then any dispatcher would then be able to know, hey, this is what happens when I say this is what I've asked them to do, so to speak. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So built into our training program are ride-alongs. They do several with police. We try to break it up into small chunks. So it helps them learn the town, and it helps them see from the police officer's perspective. So they do those ride-alongs. It totals about 4 to 8 hours, but we break it up into about 2-hour chunks. Just so to give them a little bit of repetition and different perspectives. They also do a ride along with the fire shift, and that can be from 4 to 8 hours. They'll go on a few calls just to see what it sounds like in the truck and what they do on scene. It's important for us to have that perspective, just to know what's on scene and how we come across to them and what they need to do their job. And then for a review on calls, we have a very small dispatch center. So there's me, and then I have 5 full-time dispatchers. I check in with them frequently because I've been doing this job for 15 years and I know how stressful it can be and how some calls kind of haunt you. So my door is always open. But whenever there's any kind of big call or something that they're questioning, we'll listen to it together. We review it. It's kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, if you will, but I feel like they can learn the most from their own calls. So we'll review it and point out like what worked and what maybe we could tweak to do better next time. So we do that quite often, and they're really great about coming to me if something's bothering them. We also have other resources, like Dr. Sawyer, who spoke last week at our last meeting. They have resources that they can go to if they're struggling with anything, and that's very important for them. And also their sergeant on duty. If the call's happening or they're questioning themselves during their shift, I don't want them to go home and sit on it. So sergeants are also very available to review that with them. And they'll talk to them and they'll kind of send me an email and say, hey, can you check in with them? So we try to stay on top of that as much as possible, but we do actively review calls on their shift every day.
Right, and like the same day. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them the same day. Sometimes it's the next morning. I work Monday through Friday, normal hours. So I'll come in the morning and I read the log every day. And I kind of choose a couple calls from each dispatcher's shift to talk about it. And I'll listen to the recording. Or maybe somebody from the public will call and say, gee, this was my experience with this call. And we'll listen to it, and we'll listen to it with the dispatcher and kind of try to figure out what we can learn from and what we can change up and do different. So we do debriefs too on big calls. So if there's a major event in town, the whole shift will do a debrief. And also Dr. Sawyer is available for that as well.
Yeah, I think you've got a fabulous resource in Dr. Sawyer. I do have to say that.
Absolutely.
Did you have your hand up, Darius? And then
So I raised my hand visually. So question is, for those calls that do you use or leverage the calls that may have been a bit challenging as learning opportunities or training for anyone else coming after? And then the second part of the question would be, given that we've experienced the pandemic, do we have any new protocols in place to help prepare for the next pandemic when it does eventually happen? And think lessons learned that we can do better. And can that relate to, or can that help maybe increase the recruiting capabilities, or potentially lead to increased retention, or knowing that when you do have somebody new, that they've gone through all the different scenarios of a pandemic and this and that, so that they're fully prepared as best they can be to talk to someone on their worst day?
So for the first part of your question, like I said, I firmly believe that our own calls are some of our best learning resources. So whenever there's a call that somebody did like really great, or maybe there's something we can switch and learn from, we pull those recordings and we save them. And we find in the training program, like when we're going over those certain kinds of calls, and use our own recordings. So when a trainee is learning about a domestic, we pull domestic calls that our own dispatch center has taken, and they're able to review that. And we use those calls to say, what would you do in that situation? And then kind of play it through so the dispatchers who are in training can see what the outcome is. So we often do use those calls, and we'll use them in monthly trainings as well. This went great. Maybe you can use these skills next time you have a call similar to this. As for the pandemic, this pandemic changed the whole way we do our jobs. Like, we never used to take reports over the phone. It was always in person. We never had to screen calls for health questions. There's so much of our job that evolved during this pandemic. We've kind of kept a running guidebook, if you will, like all the phases we've gone to, and through this evolution of our job, I've kept a binder going so that next time we can pull from it and this worked and this didn't work. And that's kind of our goal, to include that in the training program. We want people to be able to use this experience And that way, next time it's not so hard and challenging. But absolutely agree with you. Like, this has been a huge learning process, and that's invaluable to the future. And next time this happens, we'll be better prepared.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did you have a hand up, Tanisha?
Just expanding on the question Darius asked, not just this past year in the pandemic, but this past year in the whole world, and how things have really changed views on police and the response and what we do. What have you guys done as dispatchers to really make a change in that whole area of response? Because it does start with you.
So in the past 2 years, our whole philosophy as a whole PD has changed to community-oriented policing, which it's evolved into us working more with the community to solve problems. And I think that we've had to incorporate, like, we train on those calls that we hear about in the news. Oftentimes, like the Tamir Rice shooting, that audio and what that dispatcher did for their job, like, that is something I've had dispatch listen to and learn from that call specifically, because that did directly involve the dispatcher on duty. So we're very aware of what's going on across the country, and we're trying to use that to do our job better. So anything that I can grab for, audio or even news clippings sometimes for dispatch to be aware of. You might not think you have implicit bias, but we do. And that's some of our monthly trainings that our command staff has given us as well, has been on those kinds of topics. It's, like I said, we need to learn from those and see what we can do better and apply in our dispatch center. And I think mental health has been a very large part of that. All this mental health training we've gotten helps us handle callers better. It helps us be more self-aware of our tone of voice and the questions we're asking. So all these current events, they're not lost on us. We are using them to learn, and we want to do the best we can to help our community. And that community-oriented policing that Chief Poulin has brought us down this path, I think has only bettered us as a center and made us more self-aware of what we can do. We work as a team as well. So sergeants oftentimes, like, we get calls for like suspicious activity where we take the phone call and it might be, somebody doesn't look right and they're over there by the school just sitting on a bench. And for us to we ask questions to figure out, well, what's so suspicious about that? Why are we sending an officer to that? Dispatch now has resources where they can turn to the sergeant and say, I'm not really sure what you want me to do with this call. And we run it through them first so they can help us decide where we go from there. And we didn't used to have that. You used to just have to send an officer and they went and dealt with it. We're more of a team now, and we're working together to do what we can for our community and make it better.
Is implicit bias the only training you all are doing in regards to cultural, racial needs?
We've done that. I honestly, like I said, mental health too is a big one, because a lot of these calls that we're going on that are high stress and dynamic are the mental health calls, and they're only increasing as time goes by, especially with the pandemic. So there's been, a lot of that, and that helps you as a dispatcher know what questions to ask, how our tone of voice and how we dispatch to officers affects how they respond to a call. So, asking, are there weapons? Are there any mental health issues at play? When we're asking you these questions, it's helping in their mindset as they arrive to a call. So we are actively, that's a huge part of what we do. And we know that we set the tone, and we know that what we say and do can affect that call. So that's where that mental health training has come into play for us.
Don't see any other hands raised. I know we do need to get to the next topic, but I, for one, have found this extremely informative as part of all of what we've learned. And I thank you for your time, and we'll just continue to work. Chief, I meant to talk to the chief. I meant for you to I jumped in and introduced them to begin with, but did you want to comment on the dispatch topic that we just went through?
Sure. I'll just add to the fact they dispatch both police and fire, and that's important to note how busy they are. And, if a working fire comes in, and sometimes they're in there by themselves, and the police calls continue to come in. So there is a lot going on. There's a lot to that job. Myself, the deputy chief, and most of the officers could not do that job. I could not go down there right now and dispatch a working fire. That's just how complicated that job is. And then to their stress level, to their mental health, think about, answering a phone where they're asking about what are the hours of the Chili Fest next week. And then the next phone call is a woman that just found their son unresponsive from a drug overdose. So in the blink of an eye, when that phone rings, they have no idea what's on the other side. You hear about dispatchers getting depressed because they feel like they're to blame if an officer gets injured at a call, or if they go to the wrong area for a call. So you hear about all those things that play into their mindset as well. So there's a lot to that job. Most of the agencies in this area have a police dispatcher or a fire dispatcher. We're kind of unique that we have both here. So, and again, one of the less paid in the area as well. So that speaks to us trying to hire and make sure we have the best hirees there.
And I just had a quick logistical question. Does it show differently in dispatch if someone is 911 versus 772-1212? Do those show up differently? Because the 1212 might be the Chili Fest question, or someone asking for a burn permit versus the 911. Does that show up differently on the board, so to speak?
They each have a very distinct ringtone. The 911 ringtone is a lot louder and a different pitch than the normal business line. And they come in, we can see on the phone, there's a priority given to 911 calls. So if we have all our phone lines ringing at once, when you pick it up, you get automatically the 911s, but you can definitely tell the difference. They're louder and it's very clear. We also get a drop from 911 that's its own computer that gives us like location, name and phone number that comes directly from the Peace app in Concord. So there's definite distinction there.
Oh, that's good. I figured there had to be some way that you could make some sort of prioritization that way. Great, thank you. Well, again, very, very informative. We appreciate your time on all of this. It's really, really extremely helpful. Okay, that will bring us to the chief discussing crime statistics for 2019 and prevention. So I will turn it over to you. Goal number 4 of preventing crime.
Okay, I don't think you saw, but maybe Ms. Simpson has a question.
I know we need to move on, so we can talk about this.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't take.
I wanted briefly to hear from all of you whether you think there are benefits to dispatching police and fire together, or whether you think that makes the job more difficult rather than less difficult. Just if you could talk about that for a minute, I think that could help for the future as well.
I think that being able to do both is an asset to our center. I mean, it's a lot of added work. However, we have more resources and the added tools to help, because many calls aren't just clear cut, straight police or straight fire. I mean, there's a lot of calls that they're on together. And we are kind of the center of that, where we can kind of control the chaos and get resources that they need. So I feel it is an asset. I'm not sure. I'm sure the chief has more to say on that, but I feel for dispatchers, it definitely is an asset.
Did you want to comment, Chief?
I think she put it very well, that they know who's been dispatched to the call, who's going, and they can manage the resources instead of having two different buildings taking care of it, and maybe a lack of communication there. So I think that speaks well to the collaboration we have.
Anyone else? Like I said, this has been a really good topic, so I don't want to rush anybody through this at all. I don't see okay. Again, really extremely educational, informative. Appreciate your time on all this. Really very, very helpful to us.
Thank you for including us.
Absolutely. It's fabulous. It's amazing. Thank you so much for what you do. That's the other part of this. We really appreciate it, all of us. Okay, Chief, I'll let you get into the statistics.
Okay, my goal here is just to give you a brief overview of some of the things, some of the offenses that we deal with in town, our arrest rates for the last couple of years, and some preventative measures that you're all going to help me with. And then after that, Sergeant Hannah is going to speak to the traffic part. Traffic is a large portion of what we do in Exeter, traffic offenses and traffic control. So he'll speak to that after me. So what I did was, all I did was a simple search engine for, is Exeter, New Hampshire a good place to live or a safe place to live? And I think you all should be proud to know that it ranks very high in the country as a safe place to live. That's not just because of the police department, that's because of everybody, that's because of the whole community. So home snacks referred to, they performed a recent survey in 2019, and it was number 3 on the best places to live in New Hampshire. NeighborhoodScout.com listed Exeter as one of the lowest rates in America among communities of all sizes, lower than 68% of American communities. And that's their crime rate for both violent and property crimes. And then lastly, safehome.org. Listed us as number 2, top 5th percentile in the U.S., safety score of 91.93. It gave us a citizen to officer ratio of 456. Now they're going on a population of 14,600. I would venture to say we're larger than that now, but those are just a couple of good things to know. That listen, you have a good town, you have a safe town. And we're going to continue to work with you all on keeping it that way. Now let's talk about some of our statistics. Statistics are an interesting thing, right? They can go either way. They can be leaned towards whichever way you want to show, whatever your point of view is. We'll break it down with just the facts. And so far in 2021, we've had 28 arrests. Now those are physical arrests and 14 summonses. In the whole year of 2020, now what we have is we've got the pandemic, right? So that is going to skew a lot of these. So I went back to 2019 as well. So in 2020, we had 131 physical arrests and 39 summonses. What we've had to do with the pandemic is if there was an arrestable offense that was okay to be released on a summons to appear in court rather than take the person into the police department for processing, the officers would do that. They would release them on a summons to appear for court. Now in 2019, we had 280 arrests. So you saw a decline in 2020, obviously from 2019. There's going to be a lot of studies on this in the future. With the effects of the pandemic and all the different effects that had on policing and on public safety and, you name it, all your jobs as well is going to be something I would imagine. So I remember during the beginning of the pandemic and during the pandemic, there was a lot of cause for concern, especially for our children and the lack of reporting because schools were closed. And they were concerned that a lot of abuse and things like that are not going to get reported by the mandated reporters, which would have been the teachers that might have saw something or co-workers or things like that. So that might be one of the reasons for the decline, sadly. And that's the hidden figure of crime when we talk about victims and what does not get reported to police. So some of the larger offenses go like this. So aggravated assaults We're up right now than we were last year at this very same time. Right now in 2021, we have 16 aggravated assaults. Last year at this time, we had 5. And in 2019, we had 17 for the entire year. So we have 16 and it's April 20th. So simple assaults, they're also up. Last year at this time, there were 28. We now have 44 at this time for simple assaults. Criminal threatening, those are down. Last year at this time, we had 34. And this year we have 21. For the whole year of 2019, we had 43 criminal threatening cases. Now, frauds and ID theft, they're down right now at this time as well. And we'll get into crime trends and things like that, seasons, and how that plays into some of these. Right now, for frauds and ID theft, we have 16. Last year at this time, we had 39. So when we look at how do we respond to these numbers? What do we do with these numbers? You know, there's, do we data approach reaction to things? We look at, you know, is there a trend? Is there a day of the week that these come in more? Is there a time of the week? Is there a holiday? So those obviously will speak towards traffic enforcement as well. So we'll do things like DWI saturation patrols around St. Patrick's Day or some of the major holidays. We'll put more officers on certain times of the year. Summer is an uptick for us because of Hampton Beach and then the spillover that we get from the tourism and things like that. You got to remember we have the regional hospital, so a lot of things, you know, the Raymond Campground, Hampton Beach, and any kind of a medical issue, or we'll even say an intoxication issue, a lot of times they bring them to the hospital, and then Exeter Police get called back there to handle that situation or deal with it. Maybe they assault the staff, maybe they're belligerent, maybe they start destroying property in the hospital. So we deal with that. The train as well is also a source. Sometimes they will drop people off in Exeter that they don't want on the train any longer. They'll drop them off in Exeter, and then the Exeter Police get called to go respond to that. Mental illness, we see that a lot. Intoxication a lot off the train. So we talked about that hidden figure of crime, and they do the National Crime Victimization Survey. I have yet to meet anyone that has actually received one of those in the mail. Has anyone here ever received one of those surveys? I'm also a professor at community college, and my students every semester, and not one of them has ever seen one of those surveys. So that's interesting because there is that figure out there, and people don't report crimes for numerous reasons. Maybe they're worried they're going to get in trouble. Maybe they don't trust the police. Maybe they don't think the police will do a good job looking into it. So there's numerous reasons why that happens, but it's just to show you that these statistics, you know, the real number is probably larger. So what are we doing to prevent crime? We know there's a lot of theories on why crime happens. We know there's theories on how to prevent crime. But what do you folks all think? What can we do as a police department to prevent crime? I will say that of the 684 hours at the police academy, there is not one class on crime prevention. So you tell us. I know what we've been doing, but what can we do? How do the police prevent crime in a community?
Anyone want to take it? Okay, Matt, you gonna take a stab at it? Go ahead.
I'm trying to think of the professor's name at Northeastern, the broken window theory. You know, if disaster, let's just say take Portsmouth Ave. If Portsmouth Ave all of a sudden just becomes chaotic, police cruisers drive by and don't do anything, business owners don't change anything, they just let broken windows be broken or glass in the parking lot. I think what really prevents crime in a community, and this is what is the genius of Exeter, is that people here actually care. Not And just like the chief said and the Shoup said, it has a lot to do with the community, and the benefit goes towards the police and the public officials. The people that live here care about the community, and that prevents crime. That said, when we pick up the phone and call the dispatcher or the police department or fire department come, they care because they're responding and they're taking appropriate action. When the highway department comes, they do the same. So all these things work in unison with each other. And as Ann and the selectmen, Daryl and Molly know, nothing operates in a vacuum here. And I think the biggest success for Exeter is that the people care. And then the bonus is the people that the town hires also care. And it's a trickle-down effect. So kudos to everybody here, and especially those who volunteer in the community, which pretty much we all do here, or we wouldn't be on this board. So what prevents crime? Paying attention and caring about the community, not ignoring things, attending to things. What creates crime is ignoring it, letting it exacerbate, and failing to follow up with it. And you can drive into many towns and you can see who cares about their community, and you can kind of guess who may not be caring so much. We're just blessed and very lucky here. So I thank everybody that's part of this Zoom and all the people who are being paid as town employees. We're successful because of you. Keep it up.
So those are good. That's interesting. One of the things about broken windows, which obviously really was in the 80s and the 90s, NYPD kind of initiated that, is the racial connotations that kind of policing has. And that's coming out now more than ever when you talk about targeting certain areas because of maybe the way the buildings are built, or
that's not what broken windows are, Chief. It's not.
Well, that's the
what
way
people portray it as, but that is not what the broken windows theory is. The broken windows theory is a community that pays attention to its community.
Right, a community, not the police. So
correct.
If you want to pick up a flower pot that's been spilled over in your neighbor's yard, go pick up the flower pot. But don't call the police to go pick up the flower pot and then have them sit on that flower pot.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. Okay. What I'm saying is that people here volunteer. People here are coaches. They're teachers. They're on these boards. I understand that people are turning it around and saying that type of paying attention creates proactive policing. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. Mere presence and caring about the community is what prevents crime. I know this because I've talked to bad guys who hit other communities. And I did this during the interview when I was applying for this board. And they avoid this community because they know this community pays attention, that people will pick up the phone if things are out of place, or if there's open market drug trafficking going on in a parking lot. Someone's going to call in this town.
I think the problem is people are calling because they think things are out of control or something's wrong, and it's really not. And that's what I don't think it's out of danger.
I don't think it's out of control.
I think there's an understanding of the perception when we have people who just because they care so much and they call the police on someone, and then the police come and that puts them in a whole different situation. It becomes a whole different type of experience. So broken window is great, but it has some flaws to it. And I think we have to understand the flaws to the broken window theory.
All right.
But also, I just want to, before, because I know we're on a time crunch, I just want to say crime prevention also goes back to relationship building. It goes back to eliminating barriers in the community for people to access resources. It goes back to creating programs for youth to keep them busy, to keep them engaged, from police to engage with our youth so that there is no fear aligned with that. For, all of those is what crime prevention is about. And so I hope that if we're going to have this discussion, we look at the root causes, those systemic issues to crime, to really work on that prevention piece, and not just about we care, but actually looking into what is the real problem, systemic issues in our town that may cause crime. So that's my only thought.
I agree with Tanisha. I agree with you. That's, being proactive in a community is not, I guess the misperception that I'm not articulating is I'm saying it's the people. It's not really the police. It's that people like yourself, Tanisha, people like me who are volunteering to be with kids who care. And, when I say pay attention, I mean, if you had a group of kids around you and somebody was misbehaving, you'd probably say something, right? Right?
The kids, maybe.
Yeah,
but it also depends on who the kids are. A lot of times we overstep as adults. So I don't know. It depends. I'm in a different position than you. I probably would not, depending on who the kids are.
All right. Well, the kids that I've been around, and, I'll let other people speak. I guess there's a disagreement in the things that I appreciate from this town, but I appreciate that people care, volunteer, coach, and care for the kids. And I don't see anything really chaotic in the town. I see nothing but good. That's why we're all in town. It's my presumption, but if I'm wrong, please correct me.
All right, one thing I just want to say real quickly, the chief was trying to get at prevention of crime is where he was going. So I think we've got a little bit off track, not in a bad way, but I just want to recognize that Molly has her hand up. I just want to make sure that if you want to be recognized, I'm doing the best I can. Let me at least, if you could, just make sure that I can recognize you so we can have a good conversation. Go ahead, Molly.
I think one of the most informative pieces of this whole experience serving on this committee for me has been to hear about the prevention of mental health and training. And I think that is sort of the key here, because I don't think that it would be fair to say a community that doesn't look like Exeter doesn't care about their community. And I think that we need to look at advocating for increase in services, an increase in mental health for the broader community, in addition to the good work that's been happening with our own police force. Because as we've seen, training, mental health services, all of those things improve outcomes. And so I think that is the key, in my view, of what we can do to help prevent crime.
Anyone else would like to speak? I don't see other. If I'm missing you, raise your hand if you have to physically. Okay, I'll get it back to you, Chief, then, since you have the floor.
Sure. So some of the things we do, you saw in the survey, we talk about some of the programs we do. And it's as simple as doing a fraud presentation for some of our elderly communities. Doing a juvenile internet crime safety seminar at the schools, just trying to reduce the risk of somebody becoming a victim. That's how you can prevent crime. Some of the old ways of deterrence don't work anymore. The threat of a punishment or, going to jail. There's other ways. Do we look at, diversion programs instead, kind of take the offender and then, help them kind of go on a different path, youth diversion, things like that. I always say just because you can't arrest doesn't mean you should. Is there another way to look at this issue that's going on? Because like you've heard over and over again, a lot of times we are not dealing with bad people. They are just in a tough situation or made a bad choice. There are some really bad people out there. There are, and we had them in Exeter, and we might still have them where they murder people. But most people are not like that. They've made a bad decision, they made a bad choice, or they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Under the influence of alcohol is one of the underlying roots of a lot of the problems we go to. Whether it's assaults, threats, car accidents, a lot of it comes back to the use of alcohol. So, we'll do active shooter response training to businesses in town. We have some CRACE instructors. Deputy Chief is one of them, and that's free to you if you have a business. I think we did something at the YMCA. I'm not sure, but things like that. If you need, if you have something in town and you want to have the police come and kind of walk you through how to respond as a civilian to a threat like that, we have instructors that are trained to do that, and we'll do that for free. RAD classes, rape, aggression, defense classes, we have several instructors in that. Those are free. We post those on our Facebook, on our website. Obviously, with COVID, those kind of things were paused, but we hope to reinvigorate those things. National Night Out, building those relationships that Tanisha talked about, so important. August 3rd this year, we're going to have National Night Out down in the Parkway. Come down, we're going to have live music, food, entertainment, games for the kids to play, and all your police are going to be there. And, they're going to be there as people to talk with and to joke around with and hang out with. So that's really the core of it. And of course, Matthew mentioned, community involvement, watching out, making sure, if your neighbor's gone away for a week, keeping an eye out on the house or things like that. We will also do those things where if you're going away for an extended period of time, you can call our dispatch and let us know, and we'll do patrols during the midnight shift. We'll send cruiser by your property. They can even get out and walk around your house if you want. So things like that, those are free things that are out there for us that we would be glad to do for you. Because you can talk about target hardening and reducing targets, and that really comes back to the community to, lock your car doors in the driveway, not leave valuables out. Those are just some things that you folks can do to help prevent crime, take away that opportunity.
Chief, do we have an actual neighborhood watch program, or is that something that we could institute, or what's your feeling on that real quick? Or just...
No, neighborhood watch, again, is another. So a lot of these things, broken windows, neighborhood watch, a lot of these things out of the 80s and 90s started out as what were good ideas, but we've seen things become not so good ideas. So there's ways to institute a neighborhood watch without having vigilantes and people that, either want to be police or act like police, and then that's when trouble starts. We do not have a neighborhood watch program in Exeter. We can, I don't know if that's something that if you all think we should start looking into how to help develop one, but the police would not run it or anything like that. I just think it's just be a good neighbor and just look out for each other. You don't need someone on patrol, so to speak, in your neighborhood. That's my take on it.
Anyone else? Okay. Matt, and then we'll go back to the chief.
So, I want feedback because everybody lives in different spots in town, but, the neighborhood watch is a passive thing as far as people in my neighborhood. We all know each other. We know, if people go away, just as the chief said, we keep an eye out for each other. We all know what kids are in our neighborhood. We engage with them and talk to them. We know what activities they're involved in, and, we're active participants in everything to do with our neighborhood. So, that is the point that I was making earlier is like this neighborhood, this town of Exeter cares about its people. We know who works at the hospital. We know who works downtown. We know who runs businesses. We support those businesses. We care about each other in this town. And that's the genius of this town. That's my observation. What's going on in your part of town, Darius? I assume, I know people that live down where you live. I assume it's the same way down there. You know each other, right? Is he still here?
I think he had to jump off at 6, yeah. But
so, I would expect him to chime in. He's friendly with everybody. There's not a guy that doesn't or gal doesn't wave to him as he walks around with his dog on High Street or Drinkwater. So, these are the things, Chief. I know, Chief, you live out of town, and, Dover has a lot to do with similar things as Exeter. We mimic in a lot of ways, and we look at each other as towns in a lot of ways and learn from each other. I know the Baseball League learned from Dover, and Exeter's benefited because of it. But, the community is doing these things, Chief. Maybe these nights out, you'll see that when people come and talk to you, I guess. But we're seeing it, or at least I'm seeing it in other venues. We all know each other and we care for each other. And that goes a long way. That's a credit of everybody sitting here.
Well, yeah, that's clear. And the fact that everyone's doing their good part in Exeter is clear to the stats that I mentioned of Exeter being safe. But when you have to be careful, and when you talk about my neighborhood and we know who belongs in the neighborhood and who doesn't, I guarantee you, if I were to be off duty and dressed in my off-duty clothes and walk through your neighborhood, you wouldn't recognize me. What would you do? Would you call the police on me?
No, we'd talk to you because we would recognize you. That's the point. We know people in town. I'm not saying to call the cops on something they don't recognize. What I'm saying is that people are engaged in this town. They're not just sitting in their houses. I get it. The pandemic put a lot of people in their houses. That's not the norm for this town. The norm for this town is people are out and about. People walk downtown. People have kids that go to the schools. I'm not the only, my kids are older, but there are a lot of people on this board that have kids that are younger. You can't say that you don't know who your neighbors are and who the people are that you run into. You run into a lot of them. I know people that you know, that's great. We all care for each other. I'm not saying pick up the phone. I mean,
how do we prevent the crime? How do we prevent the 16 aggravated assaults this year? That's what we're looking for. How do we prevent these things? How do we prevent the 15 rapes that we've had so far this year, which is up from last year at this time? How do we do that?
That's somewhat, if someone has an answer, Katie had her hand up, so can I go back to her and then we'll come back to your question, Chief? Go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, I think maybe the energy that perhaps previously we would have put into a neighborhood watch, we could think about channeling instead into as much education of our town as possible about available resources. Because it seems like, certainly I have learned a ton about the free, non-arrest related resources that the police department offers. We've got food pantries, we've got mental health resources, we've got domestic violence resources. And the more that I know as a citizen about those resources, the better I'll be able to sort of, if I sense there might be a situation or a neighbor might be struggling in one way or another, maybe I can direct them, just make them aware of those resources before we're getting into a question where it's like, oh gosh, do they need law enforcement involvement? Like, how has a situation escalated to that point? So that it's really getting the information into as many hands as possible in the town about all of these pre-crime resources that are available, because we have a lot more than I realized. And I don't consider myself any kind of expert, but I would suspect that in general, there are a lot of people in our town who aren't aware of just how many resources are available to the citizens here. And then that way, yes, if I see my neighbor's house is on fire, I would help them, I would intervene. But then that sort of shifts my involvement with my neighbors away from monitoring and more towards just kind of sharing information.
Tanisha, sorry, I was muting myself. You're next.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think no one's denying that the community cares about each other. But I think that there's an element of naivety in what you're saying. There's also a little bit of just education we need to do. about certain things, because when we say the community cares, that's great. And I know we all volunteer. I volunteer, do a lot of work with kids and in the community and a lot of trainings. But there's an element of just lacking of certain educational pieces when it comes to DEI&J work for this community, especially when, like, I've been in this community for 4 or 5 years, pretty active, and people know who I am. They know who my children are. Yet my daughter will go downtown and still get harassed and still get bullied, and then still asked if she's shoplifting because she has a book bag on her back. So it's things like that no, it's not all the same, and not everyone cares in the same way you may care. And community caring is not the same as, still having issues in the neighborhood. So I just wanted to give you that perception and that understanding that it's not all the same. And so if I saw you in the grocery store, I probably wouldn't realize who you are, although we've been on the Zoom for the past how many months, you know what I mean? And if you saw me in a grocery store, you probably wouldn't say hello to me. You know what I mean? So it's like things like that. Like, yes, we care, but there's a different level of caring, and some caring goes to harm. So I just want you to understand that. And it's not a means to argue or to go back and forth. It's just bringing some awareness. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Tanisha. Deputy Chief Monk?
I feel like we're kind of ending up wrapping this topic up, but I'll just throw one comment out there, listening to everybody, actually kind of getting back to what Jesse talked about with triaging calls now more than in the past, in the profession period. Law enforcement has traditionally been, somebody picks up the phone and talks to dispatch and tells them one side of a story. Some of it not always accurate, some of it not accurate at all. And the dispatcher gets on the radio and tells an officer what they were just told on the phone, and that officer goes. And when there's an expectation, even in the officer's mind, that I'm showing up to something and I have to take action, right? I've been sent here, there must be a problem, and I have to solve that problem now. And I think in our profession, what really needs to start taking place is we need to start looking at things and saying, is this a police issue or is this not a police issue? And that's what we've really tried to start doing here over the last year and a half. And I'm going to give you a fictitious scenario. So a lot of neighborhoods off of High Street, right, off of there, up the hospital. And, let's say there's a young man that's walking. He's from another part of town. He's walking on High Street. It's a nice summer day. And he says, I'm going to walk down in this neighborhood. I've never been down there. I just want to walk around this neighborhood and see what it looks like. And I'm going to walk through here. And he takes a left off of High Street off the sidewalk, and he's walking down a public road, just walking through the neighborhood. Is anybody here would be surprised if somebody saw that young man and said, I don't recognize him. I don't know why he's here. I've never seen him before, and I'm calling the police? Does anybody think that may be a common reaction? And our perspective on that is, now we're not just going to send an officer to that call for that young man that's just walking down a public street, not doing anything wrong. There's going to be a deeper level of discussion on dispatch's part, on information gathering, to see what exactly is going on. Why is this person suspicious? What have they done? Did they go in somebody's yard? Are they on somebody else's property? Are they committing a criminal act? And that's what I feel like a lot of the stuff I see on YouTube with law enforcement is they're somewhere where they shouldn't have even been in the first place. And now the officers in this position, and things go badly because of that. So I really think, I'll just throw that out there, fictitious example. I'm listening to everybody talk, but I really think law enforcement as a whole needs to be looking at stuff like this a little more closely. And I throw that out as an example. A young man walking down the road that you just don't recognize, that's not a crime. And, absent anything else, that doesn't warrant a police officer, a uniformed police officer, going up and trying to initiate a contact with that person. And I'll just leave my comment at that.
I think that's well said. That's well said. Is the chief? Did the chief want to say anything? I'm sorry.
Well, I just realized we have a gentleman here who probably policed during the broken windows in NYPD.
Right.
I don't want to put him on the spot.
He's talking about you, Elliot. I think the chief's fickle finger of fate.
Well, I don't know what years he was talking about, but when I started in New York City, it was in 1969, and we walked. I had the same foot post every night. I walked on 3rd Avenue from 31st Street to 38th Street. I got to know all the shopkeepers. I got to know all the people who walk their dogs. You got to know everybody around. And if there was a problem, they came out and they looked for me. And I worked 6 at night to 2 in the morning, and it worked really well. That became your little neighborhood, and you took care of it. And then there were, of course, we had on any given night turnout, we have 80 and 90 cops turning out. And that's just in one precinct. This is in the I can't even remember what precinct I was in. 13th precinct. Right, I went from the police academy right downstairs, and so you had 240 guys in the precinct. Guys and girls. So you got to know everything that was going on, and we called it neighborhood policing. I never heard of broken windows, but I'm old and I can't remember. So maybe that did exist, but that's that. I was going to ask if we. I notice we very rarely have police officers walking up and down the street here. When we do, I know most of them. They know me. But I would imagine we have limited manpower, woman power, people power. I don't want to get in trouble, and that's why everybody's in patrol cars. Whereas when you have enough people that they could be out on foot, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and those are good points, and we're going to get back to that, especially this year after, once things ease up a little bit with the pandemic. I don't know if you folks saw, we've initiated a new trading card program, and that's really to help break down the barriers, to make officers more approachable. I know the uniform can be kind of daunting to both children and adults alike. So to give something that can kind of help break down those barriers, something as simple as asking for a baseball card. So officers are all going to have baseball cards, or dispatchers have them. And it's just something to kind of help with that. And you're going to see more foot patrols downtown, more mountain bike patrols, but not only downtown. We're encouraging the officers to take the bikes out to some of these neighborhoods further away, like the deputy chief mentioned, off of High Street or off of Linden Street, or down even off Epping Road, all these areas, and just get out and ride the bike around and see how people react to seeing you on a bike, and, generate that conversation. And so you would have been prior to the broken windows, 70s and 80s, late 80s. But it's that policing that you just described. They're getting out, they call it the walking the beat back then. It's that type of policing that gets more interactions, because what happened was obviously officers were put in patrol cars, and those patrol car windows went up and the radio went on, and it blocked them out from their community and from those interactions. So we have to get back to that grassroots, really people and people. And that's what it comes back to.
I'm looking forward to all those new initiatives once we get through the pandemic. It'll be great to see everybody out and about soon. Chief, do you have time for Sergeant Hanna, or since we've gone over, it's 4:20. It's, I know I try to be mindful of everybody's time.
I can be available the next meeting too, if that works.
Does that work for everybody? Because again, I know we're 20 minutes over. So again, like to be mindful of the time, because I think our next meeting we're getting into goal number 5. So I think we'll have time. I'm sure we'll have time. Did anyone have anything else in the last few minutes? Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. I did not get any correspondence. Nobody writes to me. I guess that's a good thing. Other than that, I would look for a motion to adjourn. But before I do it, again, I want to thank the dispatchers. Thank you, Sergeant Hannah, for being here. And even though we're not talking to you, I look forward to, I'm glad you were able to hang in here, and all the board members. But I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Motion by Matt. Do I see a second?
Second.
Second by Tanisha. Very good. I will just call the roll real quick. Elliot Berkowitz.
Aye.
Matt Carboni.
Aye.
Katie Adams.
Aye.
Alexis Simpson. Did I lose Alexis? And Tanisha Johnson.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Again, thank you all so much.
Thanks, Ann.